representation of a biogeochemical model that we developed. So on the left side, what you see here is a developed watershed with various land uses, including forest, agriculture, industries, urban areas. So these different mixed land cover is going to affect how rainfall is partitioned into evaporation, transpiration, and runoff. On the right side, I have highlighted major fluxes that we want to understand how they change as a result of rainfall, changing weather patterns, right? So the key ones are precipitation, evaporation, and transpiration. There is surface runoff, there is subsurface runoff, there is aquifer recharge. So we want to know how each of those fluxes or storages are affected by the land use as well as the weather. So here's again another representation of different land cover types that I just mentioned, and then the dynamics of how water rainfall is partitioned into these different fluxes are different based on the land cover type. For example, urban areas with more impervious land cover would generate more runoff, whereas forest areas with more vegetation will generate more evaporation and transpiration. Now we want to understand the spatial and temporal dynamics. So what we did, we divided the entire Mississippi River Basin into 7 different regions. We further divided that into about 30,000 smaller watersheds. Each watershed is further divided into what we call a hydrologic response units, and then we applied the water balance and chemical transport model in each of those smaller units in order to understand the spatial and temporal variability. The analysis is done at daily and hourly time steps so that we can understand the very detailed changes that are happening in the landscape, and the assessment is done on a decadal scale from 1980 to present. So, as I mentioned, there is a direct, or there is a very close connection between changing or intense changing weather patterns that affects runoff, again, in return, that affects pollution transport. So in order to, with the development of the model, we understand what is going on. The next phase is, now we know how or where the sources are, where most of the pollution sources are coming from. Now we got to provide a solution, right? So here is again a broader overview of what we did. We implemented various conservation plans. This is a smaller subset of the larger watershed that I highlighted earlier. We implemented various conservation plans. For example, during the off-growing season, you grow what we call a cover crop that covers the land surface so that the soil erosion is prevented or minimized. Or there is a grass waterway which traps sediments, or buffer strips or riparian forest along the stream segments. We plant trees that will prevent excessive soil erosion, right? So we parameterized these various conservation practices and incorporated in our biophysical model in order to understand how effective these practices are. As I mentioned earlier, our goal is to reduce these chemical pollution, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen, by 2035 by 40%. So what you see here is we evaluated about several combination of conservation measures and identified which combinations would help us to accomplish our goal of 40% reduction. In this particular example, what we see here is 3 different combinations, actually 4 different practices that are implemented in combination would result or would help us to accomplish the policy goal, which are cover crop, contour cropping, terrace, and variable rate reduced fertilizer applications. The next phase is to do some, so there are a lot of states that are implementing these measures in order to understand whether we are able to accomplish these goals. So that part I'm not going to present. So here, this is an evaluation of a solution. The next phase is go to the field and implement this, assess the issues that we encounter, improve the representation, and then consistently assess whether we are able to accomplish gradually the goals that we are planning, right? So broader conclusions are there are multiple pathways exist in order to address these pollution issues. There are robust strategies that we can develop. One of the ways is to identify critical source areas that contribute to the most pollution and then start implementing these strategies in these areas, right? And then there are other implementation issues that we need to consider, such as funding, monitoring and verification mechanisms, things like that, right? So going back to my initial framework, I presented to you 2 different projects. One is addressing these water and food security challenge, focusing on South Asia, and then this biggest environmental pollution challenge. Our goal is to develop a framework incorporating the key drivers that affect these problems, identify the key mechanisms and then sources, and then use those lessons learned from those to develop feasible solutions. So this is an overview of the projects that we are working on. I'll be happy to answer questions. I'm also open to future collaborations. If there are any bright students who want to pursue higher studies, particularly PhD studies in some of these areas, please contact me whenever there is an opportunity. I'm always looking for good students who really work hard. So with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you for listening.